The backbenchers in there, would you like to come up so we can see your faces more clearly? Okay, it's an interactive panel, so it'll be good if you guys are closer up. I'm going to come and ask each of you individually if you don't start moving. Okay. Sorry for the, we heard in the panel earlier that things in India never work right, and so this is an illustration of why we are 8 minutes late. But we will run this panel in a scheduled manner and keep it going. So please have a seat. Please come on in. On the last Sunday in August, my wife and I decided to visit El Matador Beach in Malibu, about 10 miles from where we live. And so we drove down Pacific Coast Highway, had a couple of hours of a nice time at the beach, and we were driving back, and it was a beautiful sunny day in Malibu. And I came to a stop at Ramirez Drive, and the light was red and we were waiting, and all of a sudden we hear this enormous explosion, and neither my wife or I could figure out what happened. And I said, did a big rock fall on our car? What exactly happened? Well, it turned out that on that beautiful day, a woman behind us was driving her Subaru Forester, was probably texting, because the first thing she told me, I wasn't on the phone. Of course she was. But the net result was that our car had tremendous damage, but more importantly, both of us actually got the experience of whiplash. And so we went into the emergency room, and they used a medical device called an X-ray machine, which all of you have heard of. And for my wife, they put her through the CT scan to see if there was any issue, because she was feeling very disorganized. And a few days later, just in about 2 weeks ago, I went into this facility in Beverly Hills where this device is an entire room, and you have to remove any magnetic particles or devices or rings or whatever, and you sit between these two gigantic plates. And I'm not a very wide guy, but I'm sitting with my shoulders next to the plates, and it's a device called a magnetic resonance imaging machine, which looks at your entire body. It can. In my case, they were looking at the back of my neck, the cervical spine, as they call it, to see if anything was wrong. And the reason I run you through this is, of course, to kind of illustrate the various kinds of medical devices that people may encounter in their lives. As something as simple as a stethoscope or a thermometer is a medical device as well. And if you have anyone in your family who's had cardiac issues, everybody know what a stent is. Okay, a stent is a medical device. If you have knee replacement surgery, they put in an implant. Okay, that stays with you for the rest of your life. That's a medical device. So medical devices come in a very wide range of sizes, shapes, and purposes. Some don't touch you, and others live inside you for the rest of your life. And some are disposable, and others last longer than any of us do. So it's a wide range. My name is Gunjan Bagla, and I run a management consulting firm called Amritt. About 40% of our business comes from medical device companies. And so while I'm not living in the medical device world directly, I've had plenty of exposure to some of the best large, small, and early stage companies in the sector. And what I'd like to do is understand the nature of the audience here a little bit. So how many of you are in the medical device or healthcare business? So I'd say about half. And how many of you who are not in the medtech or healthcare business are here because you're interested in entrepreneurship? Okay, so a few people haven't put up their hands, and I want to ask those, Are you here because of the handsome panelist? Okay, okay, we have one. Is there any other reason, seriously, why someone is here? Because there's something in it for everyone in the audience. So if you are here and you intended to be here, you're not here for the motorcycle convention. Okay, I just want to make sure. Is there any other motivation why someone is here? Okay, good. So we will address those issues. We'll talk about entrepreneurship. We have several entrepreneurs here on the panel. We will talk about medical devices, and we will talk about their unique experiences. We have a very powerful set of panelists here. And there is a slight change from the schedule that you saw. Ajit Mishra couldn't make it here because of health reasons. And so my dear friend and former client, Anurag Asthana, has taken his place. So I will very quickly, we won't talk about the bios of each panelist at any length because all of you have smartphones and you can look them up on LinkedIn yourselves. Let me just start from one end. Michael Malin is the president and co-founder of Stasis, a local USC startup. I first visited them about 2.5, 3 years ago. True startup mode. They were living and working in the same place in a house in Palms or West LA. Are you still there?
No, we haven't actually.
You have a real office now. Amazing. Okay, great. Okay. And then we have Anurag Asthana, who has worked at a number of medical device companies, HillRom, General Electric, Covidian, which was then purchased by Medtroni. And when I first met him, he was in the Northeast, and his dream was always to move to California. And I'm so glad that that has happened now. And once you move to California, you can never move away. Okay. Next to Anurag is Sanjay Srivastava, whom I've also known for many, many years. When we first met, he was at a company called EV3 in the neurovascular business, right? Yeah. And EV3 was then purchased by Covidian, which was our client. And then Covidian was purchased by Medtronic. That's the nature of the medtech business. You know, you start small and someone buys you, or you have an IPO, and then someone else buys you, and ultimately either Medtronic or Johnson & Johnson or Boston Scientific buy you, right? Okay. And then we have, nearest to me here, we have Vish Nath, and Vish recently took over as CEO of a company called Alpha Thermodiagnostics. Okay. Yeah, the machine sitting over there, you know, everybody has used a thermometer. This is a full body thermometer. Okay. And maybe during the lunch break, if somebody wants to volunteer themselves, then Vish can demonstrate how that works. So for those of you who are not in the med tech business, I think it would be useful to get a little bit of an idea of what in the world is a medical device. And Anurag, would you like to address that question a little bit? What is a medical device?
So, I mean, medical device, if you go to a hospital.
Can everybody hear him?
Is it on?
Yeah, just keep it closer.
Hello. So, medical devices, I mean, you encounter every day. I mean, it can be a thermometer to an MRI machine. So, there are instruments, there are capital equipment, and there are disposable, consumable types of devices, but it is all geared towards healthcare. How we can diagnose a certain disease, or how we can provide a therapy for treatment or cure. So, I mean, I think everybody has encountered medical devices in their lives in some form or the other.
Thank you, Anurag. Anybody want to add briefly to that? Yeah, Vish?
So we use medical devices every single day. I'll give you one example. Everybody brushed their teeth this morning. You know that toothbrush is a medical device. It has to go through the FDA regulation. That tongue depressor which we use, that's a medical device. The floss which we use, that's a medical device. So they range from very basic thing, you know, those bedpans which patients keep next to their bed. From bedpans to toothpaste, to toothbrushes, anything which touches human body for diagnosis or treatment or may impact our body, those things are called medical devices. That's why they have to go through and that's the FDA definition. So they have to go through even your glasses. their medical device. So they have to go through, there are some regulations, FDA regulations, European have their own standards, Canada, Australia, they have their
Okay,
own standards.
so that's a great segue to my next question, and I'll address that to Michael, being probably the youngest entrepreneur here. So when when you are in school and you want to start a company, you look at Snap and you look at Facebook, and you say, okay, let me start a software company. All I need is the laptop I already own, right? And I can get going. But when you want to start a medical device company, okay, you are in automatic partnership for this vast, complex, and powerful government agency called the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Okay. If you want to sell your product to Europe, they have something called CE, and many other countries have their own regulatory bodies. So tell me, Michael, you're a biomedical engineer, electrical engineer by training. You could have chosen many different fields coming right out of school. Why deal with medical devices?
So when I look at the world that we live in healthcare, it's a pretty reactive world, right? So to kind of paint a picture of what I mean, say you're in the hospital, patient seems fine, next moment they're declining, go into cardiac arrest, code blue is going out over the radio, people are rushing in trying to shock them back to life. As we grow older, as there's more people, that's just not a sustainable model. And so since I was a child, I've always imagined a world that's a lot more proactive. Right, so if you take that same scenario, you actually anticipate that patient's having a code blue in advance of it happening, letting the nurses and doctors know about it so they can intervene before it ever happens. That's essentially the premise of my company, to accelerate that, and it's something that I just became extremely obsessed by the concept when I was a child. So yes, I could go and build a social media site or a photo sharing app, but that just didn't really excite me. So I wanted to tackle a real problem.
Okay, thank you. So, Sanjay, you've had a very interesting career. I've been fascinated by people who can transform from one function to another. Most people start out, if they start out in sales and marketing, they stay in sales and marketing. People start out in engineering, they stay in engineering, and one day they decide to start a company, and they feel a little bit lopsided because they only know one function, and then they are dealing with other mysterious functions that they don't fully understand. I remember a few years ago we had the conversation when you told me that you were moving from R&D over to marketing. So tell us a little bit about how that has equipped you now, today, as you start your own company. How has that experience shaped you?
Sure. First, I wanted to say to people who are standing, there's a few seats up here if you care to come and sit up front. Gunjan, yeah, of course, I get bored of doing the same thing, so that's why I reinvent myself every 5-6 years, just try to do something different. But essentially, while I do different things, I also find that I still do the same thing, no matter what the function is, no matter whether it's a big company or a small company. So what Gunjan is referring to, that I was a product developer in a medical device industry many years ago, and then I became product marketer. And then now I'm a medical device entrepreneur. But at the same time, I still work with the same ecosystem of physicians, network of physicians called interventionalists. So Vish talked about what medical devices that could be very simple. And my career has been in the body plumbing business, what I call. So the cardiovascular systems that circulate blood through the body. And there is essentially like plumbing system at home, there is two kinds of diseases. One is that either the pipes get clogged or pipes burst or become leaky. So we have developed systems to fix those without opening the procedure, without opening the body, by inserting a little needle at the groin and traveling wherever the blood, using blood vessels as the pathways to fix them. So while I may have touched on different aspects of this in my 18 plus years in medical devices, I have essentially continued to develop technologies for one part of the body to another part of the body, fixing the plumbing systems. And sometimes I've developed those, sometimes I've developed technologies for those, sometimes I've marketed those, bought companies, sold companies, or now starting my own companies. But there's been a lot of fun, and that's how I relate one thing to the other.
Okay, thank you. So one consistent theme I've noticed in the medtech business is the very humble approach that people who lead medtech companies have. You know, this remarkable miracle called the human body, right? But you notice Sanjay describes it as a plumbing system, right? And it's a way to kind of explain to everybody what's happening, right? I was at a company in Minneapolis earlier this week, and they said, well, we have a roto-rooter for, you know, cardiac arteries, okay? Which is exactly what they do. In fact, Boston Scientific has a competing product called the rotoblator, almost like roto-rooter, right? You know, most med tech companies have tremendous engineering and scientific talent, but they are often, med tech companies are the unsung heroes, right? You know who's the surgeon who performed the first heart transplant, right? We make heroes of the physicians, but sometimes we don't make heroes of the med tech guys and gals who are actually enabling those surgeons to look like miracle workers. And I just wanted to get a little bit of your feedback, each of you, on A, this, you know, very humble role that medtech entrepreneurs seem to take, and B, really the larger impact on the healthcare ecosystem. Medtech, without medtech, you know, a lot of the healthcare ecosystem wouldn't exist the way it does. And here in the US, we consume 17% of our GDP on healthcare. A very small portion of that actually goes to guys and gals like these. And I wonder if you could address both of those questions, starting with Michael, very briefly.
So when I think about medtech and kind of why we're doing it is, I mean, at the end of the day, when we look at the doctors or nurses and others operating in the healthcare environment, it's a tool that they need. So I mean, I guess the question around unsung heroes, I'm not exactly sure how to address that one, quite frankly. I mean, it's you know, there's different angles that we all take and what we want to be working on. Working on medical devices is a really fascinating and complex set of problems, right? And so at the end of the day, we each choose what we want to work on. For myself, I chose med devices. Someone else may choose, you know, to paint a portrait. It doesn't really matter. But at the end of the day, it's solving some problem that has a greater impact, and it's really easy to get excited by that, right? Especially when you ultimately get it through to patients and see the impact of it, and you hear nurses and doctors tell you about it. I mean, I don't need that to be plastered all over the news, although actually, fortunately, a lot of times it does happen. But a doctor or nurse coming to you and telling you about something or sending you a message about how it's quite literally saved a life is really, really exciting. That's why I do it. Sorry, I forgot your second question.
What was my second question? I forgot too. I have the memory of a fish. Oh, the impact on the healthcare ecosystem.
I mean, I guess that's ultimately it, right? So if there's a ton of people doing, solving these various different problems, then as it continues to evolve, then, I mean, we live happier, healthier, better lives. It's a massive impact.
So I look at, I mean, people who are interested in medtech, they do have a passion for bringing healthcare. I mean, it's extremely satisfying to go out, understand how we can improve the lives and the health of people. I mean, what a noble cause. And at the same time, there is a great opportunity to make money. Because, I mean, none of the healthcare companies are doing this for charity. So they bring out solutions, and it helps the economy and brings healthy life. So if people can live longer and can be productive, it's a great impact on the society and human race, I mean, at a holistic level. So as an engineer, I mean, it's a great fun going out, talking to the doctors, meeting the patients, identifying how they are getting treated, what diseases that are there, how we can diagnose things. If we can come up with a treatment or a cure, it's fascinating. I mean, you can start from head to toe. I mean, from brain to, I mean, skin, there is an opportunity. So things deteriorate, things fail, how we can fix those things. It's a extremely fulfilling career. I started my career not in medical devices. I started making copiers and printers, made locomotives, and then got into healthcare, and since then I have been in the healthcare, medical devices, biotech devices, and I would say some of them could be unsung heroes, but lot of solutions, lot of ideas that come, I mean, bring revolutionary changes to the healthcare, and we can see that. We can see that how the average expectancy of, life has been increasing all over the world, not only in the developed countries, but in poor countries also. It has gone down, gone up from 20 years to 60 plus in countries like India, etc. So it's
Thank you, Anurag. Sanjay, do you want to address that?
Yeah, so since many of the audience here are perhaps people of South Asian origin, entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs, who tend to naturally get drawn to, or at least based on their backgrounds, to highly cerebral things, things that exist in some virtual world beyond perhaps my imagination. I just wanted to appeal to those guys that we make simple mechanical gadgets. These are like tangible physical things which almost seems to not exist in the Thai world. And you can actually make lots of money doing that. They're very high margin products, and you don't have to be that smart either. So not everything requires highly cerebral people. Stan's laughing here because he certainly exemplifies those super smart people, but I don't. So you just think at a human level, the physical can meet some unmet need, work towards execution. Other people are going to have difficulties execution too, and if you keep marching towards the end goal, I'm certain you're going to win. And make some friends along the way, have fun, and you're going to succeed at whatever you do.
Okay, so I'm going to change gears with a question for you. You recently took over as CEO of an existing company, right? How does that feel compared to, say, starting a company? What's the feel? I don't know if you started a company before or not, Vish, but what's the feel of coming into an existing company that has ambitious goals and then rallying the troops?
I guess it feels the same. It's a small startup company. I have done my own business back in India when I did my MBA. Then I had a partnership business. We were exporting handicrafts and furniture. Last November I was back in India and my partner said, you should not have left because that guy is the richest guy in my town now. So anyway, I joined this medical device company. It's a startup. But fortunately, we have, and this device is right here, it's a FDA approved device, CE mark approved device, Health Canada approved device. We already sold in 16 countries. It's a whole body diagnosis device, but the challenges are the same regulations, same design, improvement, all those things, same marketing. It'll be different when you start from design and concept, but here in this case what I'm doing is I have a product. So that's the advantage, that I have the product and I can use it and I can feel the difference. If you allow me, I'll give one example, a story. I think you guys will remember that how I feel being part of such an organization where we can do the whole body diagnosis. So in whole body diagnosis, basically we tell what are the challenges in the body, not the disease, but what is causing the disease. So we were sitting here in San Diego in some manufacturer's office and we were talking about this device and some of the parts being manufactured, and we thought that instead of showing the device, we'll just give you a demo. We said, okay, excellent. So we were in conference room, the manufacturer and our doctor went to nearby room and he diagnosed him. He came back and there was another person from the same organization was sitting there. So that person said, okay, so did this device find out that you have a sinus? We said, wait, this device actually generates a report. So it said that this guy has a sinus, and this sinus is due to his teeth infection. You treat your teeth, the sinus will be gone. Now think about it, this guy will go to a doctor in regular case, and he will get his sinus treatment, maybe surgery. All those sinus medication will happen. He will never realize that there is a problem with his teeth. He treats his teeth, sinus will be gone. So this is the advantage of using medical device. It takes out the subjective part. So any medical device, that's what it does. It standardize the process, whether it's the treatment process or diagnosis process. It is standardize that and take out the subjective part of the individual medical caregiver or provider.
That's a terrific story. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to audience questions very soon here. So get your questions ready. This is really meant for your benefit. So I have one question while the audience is getting ready. Okay, and it kind of takes off on the example that you just described. Okay. Historically, physicians have been known to be only next to God, right? And a lot of that depends on their ability to diagnose and say, okay, here is the problem. Okay. Now, in the meantime, we have this technology called artificial intelligence that has been developing. And I just wonder over time, fields such as radiology or psychiatry, where you can feed 1 million cases or 1 billion cases into a machine. Are some physician specialties going to be endangered by the addition of AI into medical technologies?
So I was at a radiologist meeting, maybe within the last 2 months, where they talked this very issue. That now that you can get machines to read the films, which is what radiologists do. They read X-ray films, they read MRI, they read CT, and provide the diagnosis. If you can train computers to do it, then would they be out of work? And there was a discussion in that. But generally, there was a consensus that somebody has to train computers on how to do this, do the job, and they'll just have to, like any other job, they'll just do higher and higher level job. So there is no fear that I sense in these interventional or other physician specialties that I deal with that computers will make them disappear.
Okay, Mike.
To jump in there, so I think around July of this year, the American Medical Association came out with a whole talk around AI, and rather than using the words artificial intelligence, they actually used a different word, which I really appreciated, which was augmented intelligence. And so our company does a lot of work in artificial intelligence. We have AI on patients every day. And when I'm going and talking with the medical community about this, the kind of overwhelming kind of response that I get from everyone, and I personally really, really believe this, is that there are things that AI will be able to or already can do that's better than a human, right? Because just the sheer amount of data that I can process, the amount of medical guidelines that I can reference against, I mean, that is just something that a machine is always going to be better at. But there's things that machines are never going to be better at as well, right? I mean, we are human beings, and doctors, when you're in the hospital room or when you're at home and you're actually talking to a person, human to human, there's a kind of human encounter there that, at least for the foreseeable future, I think is going to be extremely hard to replicate. And so while parts of healthcare can go to have a machine be able to just process sheer amounts of data, there are other things around understanding subtle little cues in body language, or the inflections in someone's voice, or just the ways their eyes look. And that human part is a part of diagnosing a patient, and also part of just caring for them, right? And that's really important.
Thank you. All right, so audience for questions, and what I want to do, I know there's some fairly seasoned people here, and I want to go to the younger people first, if you will bear with me. And before we do that, I also want to put in a plug. We've not talked about funding at all, and that's not an accident, because the multi-talented Sanjay Srivastav is going to transform from a panelist to a moderator in our very next panel, and we are going to have a great set of investors who will talk about funding. And then following that, we will delve deep into the story of one of the most successful Southern California medical device entrepreneurs. We are so privileged to have Stan Rowe participate here with us right after lunch. Okay, so you eat, but you come back to this room. Okay, Stan is going to tell the story of how a wonderful life-saving device was invented by his company, and Stan and I are about the same age, and he is still behaving like a young entrepreneur, and probably has another 20 companies in his career, and so we'll talk about that exciting journey after lunch. Okay, so any young person, anybody below 30 has a question, you get the first chance. Okay, nobody wants to admit they are below 30. Young man, you have a question? Don't be shy, it's fine. Are you part of TIE? Yeah, okay. You don't have a question? Okay. I'll give you 30 minutes more to think, or 30 seconds maybe. Okay. Okay. Anybody from outside the medtech business who has a question for these brilliant panelists here? Okay. All right. Former president of TAI, Vijay, go ahead.
So regarding the FDA approval, I've heard that is the biggest hurdle for any kind of medical device. And I've heard about different levels of FDA approval. So what is involved? Is that the biggest challenge for getting any kind of medical device through to the market?
So, yeah, let me answer. FDA is not a hurdle. It's basically making sure that the device will do the job it is intended to do and doesn't create another risk to the health. So you're trying to fix something and you are making something bad in the body. So that is where the FDA regulations come in. There are different types of ways of getting approval. If there are devices that already exist, so there is a predicate device, then it is much easier to get an approval for a device that is based on a predicate. If there is not a predicate, sometimes you have to do clinical trials. So you have to show in limited number of people that how your solution is going to work. So that has to go through a certain procedure that of getting those regulations in place. You perform those tests, those preclinical or clinical trials, and then you can go on. So this is seen as a hindrance by some, but not by medical device industry. And there are a lot of people who will provide advice, guidance on how it should be done. And we want more and more entrepreneurs to be coming into medical devices and not see this as a hindrance. And if you look at auto industry, you look at consumer electronics or telecom, a lot of entrepreneurs come in because they don't see any hindrance. But medical devices, it is a monopoly of quite a few companies. And how do we break that? When more people outside medical devices will not be afraid that medical devices is something to be scared of.
And I just want to echo that as well, that the FDA's job is to keep American people safe, and they absolutely do it for a good purpose and good reason. And there is some procedures, like in any regulated industry, you have to do a certain amount of testing, and if you know what that involves, then you do that and get your product approved. So it's...
Thank you, guys. So I just want to add a little bit of perspective from my side. You know, you look at any other industry, somebody comes out with a new product, they want to say, this has never been done before. We are so remarkably better than everybody. In the medtech business, they have to have this double talk, right? It's a revolutionary product, but it's just like that other one, so we can be a predicate device. Okay? And you have to do this with every government agency where you go. You know, we deal a lot in getting approvals in India for our medical device clients. And it's always this balance between we are a breakthrough technology that just looks exactly like the one that you approved 2 years ago. So this is an unusual aspect. I don't think I see that in any other industry. And the other aspect of the FDA is you have to consider, and this may not be popular for those of you who have worked for very large companies, but the FDA is the great friend for Medtroni and Boston Scientific and others, because it does set up a barrier for this little guy or gal who has an invention, because you've got to get, it costs money to get the product approved. Okay? So if you're not from within the medtech business, you'd better have somebody smart, on your team who has done this many, many times before, because there are traps and obstacles that you might fall into dealing with the FDA. They are very responsive and have become more responsive in recent years, right? Have they not? Yeah. Okay, another question from the audience?
There was a question.
Yeah, okay. So I'm going to come over to you, sir.
Okay, so I think Michael might be the best to answer this. Maybe you can talk a little bit about software as a medical device. I understand that that is an area where the FDA is thinking more, and it sounds like your device is somewhat software, somewhat hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. So software as a medical device is becoming a bigger and bigger sector, and the FDA is actually doing quite a bit to try to really get up to speed. So they've brought in a lot of people from industry with a lot of software experience. We have a hardware device with different sensors, but yeah, the predominant part of our system is software. There's software guidelines that you follow. More and more of the testing labs are familiar with software as well. There's a whole list of software and specifically artificial intelligence systems that the FDA has now cleared. So yes, they're absolutely getting up to speed there, and as the cloud becomes more and more of a place that hospital systems are comfortable putting data and processing, I think it's just going to continue to increase.
Okay, thank you. Anybody from the back rows here?
Quick question.
Yeah, hi. I'm in the design build business. I design hospitals. I was with Loma Linda Hospital for 10 years and with Pomona Valley. Do you see our capital budget, CIP, capital funding has been decreased in last 2 years when it comes to this industry?
Any of you address that? No?
I mean, I can say just really quickly that we have a pretty flexible model, but typically we actually come out of OpEx budgets to kind of avoid the CapEx budgeting cycle, which can be very long sales cycles. So I'd say in a lot of ways, a lot of vendors have been switching more and more to OpEx for sales velocity, and there's some accounting advantages depending on what you're doing as well.
So the other big impact really frankly has been the so-called Affordable Care Act, which has not really been affordable by any definition. However, it has pumped in tremendous amounts of money into the industry. You don't see people saying that very loudly, but certainly you talk to people in the industry and you know that the top lines and bottom lines have done pretty well under the ACA. Okay, quick question.
So if you have an idea, where do you start first? How do you protect your idea and patent it? So if you can guide us, please.
Anurag, do you want to take a stab at that?
Yeah, I mean, in medical devices, if you have an idea, it's very, very important that you file for patent, and IP disclosure is a must, because a lot of people would be looking at the same kind of an idea, and if you don't patent it, somebody else will get it, and then you are not going to make money. So it's very critical that if you have an idea, file an IP disclosure. That is the first step if you are trying to become a medical device entrepreneur.
Yeah, that's really important. I think in the medtech business, we deal with many different industries at Amritt, and I think it's fair to say that in the medtech business, the most powerful department in the company is not marketing, not sales, not engineering. It's really the legal department. And the IP portion of the legal department probably holds nothing happens until they approve that it can be done. At least that's been my experience. There was a question here? No, we'll get to everyone. Okay, just a second. Okay.
See, if there are some patents there for a device, if it has been existing for a long time, is there any way through web resources we can know that this patent has expired and it is open up and anybody can start it or something? So is there any web resources where we can find out those details?
Yeah. The short answer to that question is yes. All patent databases are available online. Just do a Google search and you'll find it fairly rapidly. Now, interpreting that is a whole nother beast. For that, we need a separate session.
Yeah, Gunjan, I just wanted to add to that in the next session we have one of our, the president of Tech Coast Angels, who happens to be a very accomplished patent counsel. We have a CEO of a medical device company who happens to be a former patent litigator. So I'd love to get you some answers in that session. That's a very, very touching and good point to ask.
So I love this audience. You have so many questions coming up. That's wonderful. Okay, sir. So say your name and your question.
My name is Shafir Bamwa. I wanted to actually make a comment before I ask my question. Yes, medtech entrepreneurs may be the unsung heroes, whereas sometimes doctors get the glory, but you do have the satisfaction of knowing that your invention or your product will affect hundreds, if not thousands, whereas a doctor may be saving a couple of lives a day, if possible, if that is. But my question really is, how can medtech help reduce the cost of today's healthcare?
Yeah, sure. I think capitalism is a free economy, and that's the beauty of it. When there is a need and demand for cost saving, then entrepreneurs come up and try to find ways to reduce the cost of healthcare. And we're beginning to feel that the American healthcare system today is much more cost efficient, cost sensitive, and as a result, there are technologies that people are developing which can do the same job more efficiently, save some time, or even newer devices that are available cheaper.
Yeah, so let me address that question myself here. Amritt's core business is helping U.S. companies to deal with India. And today, India is a tremendous hotbed of medical device innovation of all kinds. I'd say about half of that innovation is really driven by Android devices. So if you have one of the world's most powerful computers in the palm of your hand, right? So you attach that computer to a sensor of any kind, and all of a sudden you have a miraculous medical device that can probably do something that costs 30 cents, which used to cost $300 before, okay? And it's connected to the cloud, it gets data online, it works with the EMR, all of those things, So it's about half of the innovations are coming around the better use of smartphones out of India. The other half are really all over the place. So, and some of them are US companies. In fact, I wrote an article about 2 California companies that have taken their primary market to be India. One is a company called POC Technologies, and they have developed a way to screen for breast cancer that costs, I think, $6 or $7. Okay, so it replaces the mammogram and other tests, and it's already being rolled out in Gujarat and Maharashtra. The numbers they talk about in India are astounding, right? They want to screen 50 million women in the next 2 years. So at that kind of scale, you can develop medical devices, you can implement technologies that were inconceivable, and some things that you really can't do in the US. Okay? Now this particular platform, breast cancer screening, is just the first thing. They can replace the medium with 10 other things and have 10 other diagnostics, all of which will cost under $10. Okay? And the other company that I wrote about is right here, Michael's company. Do you want to say a little bit more about exactly what you do and what you're doing in India?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a smart patient monitoring system. So essentially we go into areas of the hospital where the nurses are walking around manually gathering vital signs, typically every 4 hours. So this is most areas outside the ICU. We have different monitoring sensors that plug in and monitor 6 vital signs. We put all that information right to the nurses' and doctors' phones, tablets, and use a layer of artificial intelligence. And so we've partnered with most of the major health systems over in India. We're available across the country there. We're just getting up and going, but so far we've provided about 14,000 days worth of care. With kind of many clinical demonstrations in India and around efficiency, both for India as well as the US, because we're working in both markets. A lot of it comes down to, more cost effectively being able to deliver care, as well as getting information to the right person at the right time. And, with the cloud and stuff and with smartphones, there's opportunities to do that. And all of that results in patient throughput being increased, right? So patients being able to move through the hospital faster. That has massive efficiency opportunity.
Thanks, Michael. So I'm getting the 1-minute warning here, so I won't take any more questions in an organized manner, but everyone will be around at lunch, so you can talk to them. The article that I just talked about, if anybody is interested in that, give me your business card, and we'll send you a copy of that article. There's another article that Anurag and I have written for Medical Device Online, which will be available next week, talking about what's it talking about, Anurag?
It's about how we can bring affordable healthcare and how multinationals can grow in emerging markets.
So that will address your particular question, sir, that you asked earlier. Okay, it should be out, I think, by Wednesday or Thursday next week. All right, I think we are at the end of our formal discussion here. I want the audience please to join me in thanking the panelists here who've done a tremendous job.
I think the second session continues. That's all I was going to say. The second session continues, and then there is lunch break, and then there is a chat with Stan.
Please stay in your seats, and
Yeah.
we will reshuffle the deck here.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And any unanswered questions or things that couldn't be asked, I think it's related enough to the second session that hopefully we'll get some of those covered there.